Hi, everyone. Welcome. My name is Lynn, and I'm lucky to be here today with John Frederick Furth, entrepreneur, consultant, disruptor. After 15 years in management consulting, working with C-suites all over the world, president and CEO of the trade for the Association of Management Consulting Firms, and Vistage chair for Brooklyn currently, New York. Also, John is an author of the book, Owning Tomorrow, The Unstoppable Force of Disruptive Leadership. John, thank you so much. Welcome. How are you?
Thank you. I'm good. Little self-isolated, but it's slowly but surely starting to come back together in New York City. I actually had my first face-to-face meeting with four of the members of my Vistage group this week.
That is exciting because I still have yet to have any face-to-face meetings, so at least there's some progress there, you know?
Exactly. But it's practically like you're here in the room with me.
I know. You know what? I am getting used to it. In the beginning, it seemed like such an odd way to do anything. And now it's amazing. Like, I almost want to say I've become so tech savvy because of all of this. And I know I'm not the only one. It did push me out of my comfort zone, that's for sure. But it definitely has gotten easier to do things this way.
Right. Yeah. Well, wait until you work with CEOs who never touched a piece of technology unless their assistant helped them see how they're struggling with technology and how quickly they're learning.
No, I leave that to you, John. See, that I could not do. I can just barely work it myself, never mind trying to help anybody else to do it.
Oh yeah, I'm not that good either, but it's funny to see CEOs who never touch anything and only have their assistants do things. I'm going to do this on their own.
Yeah, I'm going to get to that level one day where everybody else can do it for me, and then I can kind of take myself out of that equation and busy myself with other things.
Right.
So I had a lot of questions, a huge amount of questions. I read your book. I loved your book. If everybody has not read the book, please go get it. It's amazing that it was written over 2 years ago, yet I think it's more applicable now than ever. It's almost like you had a crystal ball in a way, because you did, in a couple of times in the book, say certain things that led me to believe that you kind of saw stuff like this coming. Like the rest of us might have been sideswiped by it. It seems like you had an idea that it was all about to start to kind of take a turn. And I did get the impression, though, that when you were writing the book, that you felt like we were at the peak of disruption at that point. Here it is 2 years later, and just look at what our lives are like every day and the economic spill out. First, can you just describe to us what your idea of a disruptor is and disruption? I was thinking, natural disasters or something about, an economy falling apart, yet it's so much more complex. Can you please explain it in the best way possible, like you did in your book?
Sure. Now, first of all, when I talk about disruption, it's about business and the leadership required to be a good disruptor, but also to save yourself when you're being disrupted. I really say there's sort of four kinds of disruption. The one that we all know about, which is the external market-facing disruption, when Amazon comes along and pretty much puts all booksellers out of business, but transforms the distribution of literature, of written materials, to such an extent that people who've never even seen a book before actually can order them and read. Plus making it much easier, much cheaper to get books to people around the world. That's the one we always think about. But then there's the internal disruption, when a company has gotten itself into trouble, bad strategy or operational issues, maybe an organizational problem, and you have to literally come in and change the organization, transform it through some very difficult times. Then there's the I would say counter disruption, when you've gotten disrupted, your business has suddenly somehow gotten disrupted, and this is when we start talking about things like earthquakes, hurricanes, natural events, but also government regulation that can disrupt you, and you got to figure out how to adapt. And then there's the one that I think everybody's probably most interested in, which is what I'll call self-disruption, where you're heading down a path, you're not comfortable with it, or it's not where you thought you would go, or something bad happens, and you literally have to start by changing your mindset, the way you think about things, actually make it a priority to disrupt anything you were doing or thinking or saying, and turn it around and do something different. It's sort of like the definition of insanity, like what Einstein said: the more you believe you're going to have the same outcome doing the same thing over and over again. You got to sometimes say, stop it, and need to change. So that's basically the beginning of disruption. The actual process is something's not working, a system, an industry, whatever, it's become very self-serving perhaps, or just very lazy. A company becomes lazy, or as in the case with COVID, it was a blind spot. Nobody could have said 6 months ago even that this was going to happen, although there were some feelings that we were due for a pandemic. And there's short-term misery. Disruption, obviously, in most people's minds equate it with something very bad happening. And indeed,
yeah,
it does.
That's what I did. I thought bad.
Everybody did. And it's strange because I didn't start this movement. It started really essentially in 1994, but it's much bigger than a movement. And it took on now such positive connotations that a lot of my younger clients and members of my group actually want to become disruptors. Because of the knock-on effect, you may cause short-term pain, or short-term pain may be part of it, but the long-term effects are so transformational, not just for you as a leader, but for your company, for an industry, or even indeed the entire world. And that's why I like to say now we're in the middle of the great disruption, because I don't think there's a human being on earth who hasn't in some way been touched, not only by the COVID virus, but a lot of the knock-on effects. And by I mean touch, everybody is aware of it. And everybody's gone through self-isolation. I don't think there's any country that hasn't at least self-isolated for a little while. So this is probably the only time on Earth when the entire population has been disrupted.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And when you talk about, insanity is doing the same thing over and over and looking for a different result, in a sense, you're like the cooler head that prevails when you go into a company and you work with the CEO. And you also mentioned your group, which is the Vistage group. So that's pretty much what you do. You help them, you coach them when they have these blind spots, because again, when we're all anxious and we are panicking or things aren't going our way, whether it's COVID or in the business world, we don't tend to see those warning signs that say maybe it's time to pivot, and that's what you do.
Right. And what's great about what we just went through, and again, this movement as a movement started in 1994. That's when Amazon was founded. That's when Clayton Christensen of Harvard Business School started publishing his articles and books on the concept of disruption. And then we just saw disruptive companies just come from everywhere, whether it's LinkedIn or Uber or Tesla, to break up what admittedly were either industries that had fallen asleep or fragmented industries, or in the case of Tesla, where Elon Musk really bit off a major piece to see if they could change the environmental impact of fossil fuel, for example. So all of them have short-term misery. People are put out of work, companies are put out of business, a lot of change. And certainly in most cases, it has been transformational or kicked off a transformation. Yeah. So as I said, today is really, as you said, I kind of thought, I looked at it as a trend, and I thought, oh God, maybe this trend is going to peak. I don't know. I'm not really, I'm sort of new to the topic. I took what I do and realized I had been disrupting my entire career. And I was actually worried my book was going to become outdated. So when COVID virus hit, it was clear that this was going to be a major thing. What even then, let's say 2 months ago, I didn't realize it was going to so uproot some bad practices, bad systems, that with the death of George Floyd, of course, the floodgates of inequality finally opened, which we had been saying, we knew and we know is a gargantuan problem. Little did we realize, well, first of all, nobody knew 6 months ago that we were going to get this virus. I don't even think the WHO knew. But little did we know that this virus was in turn going to kick off major, major disruptions, all because there are things that are not working well. And the inequality, the racism is a big problem. So what's wonderful about disruption is all bets are off. And usually it's the underperforming, the weak, the improperly managed situations that eventually get fixed.
Right, but like you said, it is a major undertaking, especially since everything kind of came at us in like two waves in a way. First we had COVID, everybody was still trying to scramble and figure out. And then with George Floyd and the protests that are going on across the world, I mean, it's not even just here in the United States.
Right.
And, in your book, you talk about timing, and I think
Mhm.
timing is one of those very crucial things in life, but it's very difficult. Like
Right.
re-rigging a ship is dangerous enough, never mind doing it during a storm. So
Mhm.
how do you figure out like the timing of when's too soon? You don't want to pull the trigger too soon and then everything is haphazard and chaotic.
Right.
But if you wait too long, you might miss an opportunity. Like how do you coach people when it comes to that?
Yeah, that's almost on an individual basis. In general, what I'm proselytizing, if you will, or evangelizing, is that if you don't use, or if you haven't used this last 3 months, and who knows how long, we're still going to have a very extraordinary situation where we're not meeting, we're not distracted by politics necessarily, we're not distracted by people distracting us at work, where we can really focus and take some time to think. I tell all of my clients, all of whom have their own businesses, if you're not actually taking advantage of this to not only think through, but implement changes you've wanted to do forever, whether it's implementing a new software, new technology, whether it's opening up or planning to open up a new market segment, do an organizational realignment. If you haven't taken the time to think through it and at least started implementing, you have missed one of the great opportunities your business will have. This was almost, in some ways, if you put on the abundance mindset for a second, this was a great opportunity for businesses. Yes, there was pain, but out of pain comes transformation. And absolutely, I mean, some industries have been devastated, travel, restaurants, anything that requires lots of face-to-face contact for the experience. They don't have a choice. It's those that are doing all right. Technology companies, the first thing I always think of. The ones I know are doing all right. They're not suffering, but it's not quite what it was before. But also because they're technologists and they know technology changes rapidly, they're all thinking about a pivot, and they're all thinking of new markets they should go after, product changes, and so forth.
Yeah, out of all the industries, I would have thought that technology would be one that would kind of be able to pivot a little bit better than maybe the rest
Right.
of us. I'm in fitness, and that definitely it's going to change forever. I mean, I can't ever see it going back to face to face. I work in medical weight loss, and you cannot blame people for not wanting to touch other people's weights, to not be in that
Mm-hmm.
scenario anymore.
Right.
But technology, I mean, this is the booming time for technology.
Oh yeah, well, the basis of technology and professional services, although professional services often, and by that I mean accounting, law, what I do, consulting, coaching, does require a certain amount of face-to-face because of the trust issue. And indeed, my clients are slowly getting a little tired of the virtual face-to-faces, although some of them have been very good. But face-to-face is not just a nice to have, it's very necessary in a lot of businesses, but a lot of businesses don't. And a lot of businesses you wouldn't think could go virtual, such as construction, are finding ways to make a lot of aspects virtual. Now, people still have to show up and build the thing, but
Yeah.
Everybody, the virtual thing is a trend that this virus and this great disruption has reinforced. So trends like mobility, the home becoming more and more the center of a life, not just for living, but also for your work and so forth.